Have you ever been to church and just felt totally inadequate? Like you're walking around and you're looking at all these people and you're like, they're good people. These people seem to do everything right. It's like they're just saying all the right answers. And when you talk to them, they seem like they conduct themselves in the right way, like all the time. Their family seems perfect. They never yell at their kids. They never get mad at their husband. Everything is always great. And they're always doing everything right. And you look at them and you think, yeah, I'm never going to be like that. Those people are good. And yeah, it makes sense that God is using them. They're doing good things for him. And I can see that. But why would he use me? Because I'm not like that. And I'm never going to be like that. Like, I don't know how I can possibly ever be as good as this person or that person. Maybe you've felt like that before. Maybe you haven't. But I have heard from many people that they do feel like that they go to church and they look around and they say, these are good people, and that's not me. And they're discouraged. They think, what do I have to offer God? And how can I be a witness for him whenever I don't do everything right? And are these people looking down on me thinking, of course, you don't do everything right. You are not the greatest person and I am a good person. Do they see this? Am I the only one that notices they're good and I'm not, And so this is the end of Samson's life. That's the story that we're going to be talking about today. And as we end his life, I just want us to talk about how he really is a weak and flawed person. We look at him as a strong man, right? This is what we think about Samson. Samson is the strong man in the Bible. But he's not strong in the ways that really matter, that make you a good person. He doesn't seem strong in mind or spirit, right? And that is his downfall. And he's weak. His weakness is women. And he doesn't do a very good job at fighting off his weakness. And so when you look at Samson's life, you kind of think, he doesn't seem like really all that good of a guy. He's not this person that you would look at in church and think, oh, they do everything right. They're good. He's kind of violent. And soldiers are supposed to be violent. We are fine with that. They protect us, and that's what we want. But his violence doesn't seem really for the good of the country or anything like that. It seems like he's more just taking vengeance all the time. And so if you look at his life, you're kind of like, he's really not that good of a guy. And yet God uses him. And so the first thing we're going to do is just see what happens at the end of Samson's life after he's been imprisoned and how he dies, and then talk about his life and why God does use Samson instead of somebody that is better, and also why God ends up giving him his power back after he is the one that lost it in the first place. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to summarize Judges 16:22 to 31. And just as a little recap, Samson has been dedicated to God from the moment of conception. And what he had to do outwardly to show that he was dedicated to God is to keep himself from alcohol, keep himself from dead bodies, and keep from cutting his hair. Those are the three outward signs that he is dedicated to God. And because he is dedicated to God, God is giving him superhuman strength to fight the Philistines, because the Philistines are rulers now over Israel. And that is Samson's entire purpose, is to fight the Philistines. God tells his parents, you are going to raise a man that is set aside to me from the very beginning. And this man's whole job is going to be to judge the Philistines. And so we know this from the very beginning about Samson. And all this time he's been fighting the Philistines. We know he's killed over 1,000 Philistines at this point. And then he falls in love with Delilah, who is a Philistine woman. And the Philistine rulers come to her house and they say, hey, we'll each give you 1,100 pieces of silver if you will find out the secret to his strength and tell us what that is so that we can capture him. And that's what happened. She badgered him until he finally gave in and told her that if his hair was cut, then he would no longer be able to defend himself. And so she put him to sleep in her lap and cut his hair and then called the Philistines in and they captured him. And they have Samson now in prison. And that is what brings us to the point today where we are in the lesson. And so in Judges 16:22, it says that Samson's hair has begun to grow back. And at some point, while he's there in prison, the Philistines decide to have a gathering where they're going to praise and worship their god, Dagon. And they're going to present offerings to him. And traditionally, this was thought of as a sea god because it had the head of a man and the body of a fish. And then also people say that Dagon was a name for grain. And so maybe it was a grain god. Maybe they were celebrating a harvest or something. Regardless of what they were there making offerings to their god for, at some point, they thank their god for allowing them to capture Samson. And obviously, this is an affront to God, not just Samson. And so, is God really going to let that stand when the Philistines think that their God has, triumphed over Samson's God? That's probably not going to stand. And so, that is one reason that I think at the end of this, we'll see what happens, that God allows this to happen because he's not going to allow them to believe that their God is more powerful than he is. And so that is part of what's going on here. They're praising him and saying, thank you so much for allowing us to capture this man who's been our enemy all this time and killed so many of our people. And then when they're thanking God for this, they're like, yeah, speaking of Samson, let's bring him out. And remember, they've gouged his eyes out and he's weak. And so they want to see him, stumbling around in the dark and looking weak and completely incapable of, defending himself, which is what he's been doing all of these years that they've been dealing with him. And so they bring him out so that they can, just look at him and see what a spectacle he's become. And it says that a man brings him out and he stands in the doorway, so to speak, of the temple between two pillars. And there are over 3,000 people on the roof just looking down at him, laughing at him, seeing how weak and, messed up he is now that they have captured him. And so he's standing there between these two pillars of this temple with all these people there. And then we hear the very first recorded prayer of Samson to the Lord. Now, did Samson pray to God before this? Very possibly, but we've never heard it before. This is the first time that we've ever heard Samson call out to God and ask him for strength. And so that's what he does. He says, oh God, please remember me and allow me to have strength just this one more time so that I can kill these Philistines that are all here. And I'm even willing to die with them. Like, I know I messed up. I will die here with these people, but allow me enough strength to kill these people. And I say he knows he messed up. He does not say that, okay? I'll actually read you the exact prayer so that I'm not putting words into Samson's mouth. He says, oh Lord, remember me, I pray. Strengthen me, I pray, just this once, oh God, that I may with one blow take vengeance on the Philistines for my two eyes. And then it says that he braced himself between these two pillars that supported the temple. And it says that the last words he says is, let me die with the Philistines. And then he pushes the pillars down and the whole temple collapses. And of course, Samson dies, but so do all of the men and women that are there. And all of the 5 Philistine rulers are there. So he has toppled their entire government, so to speak. Okay. They don't really have a state or a land of their own. They're living in Israel, but they have territories that they're ruling over because the Israelites have not completely eradicated them from the land. And so they have 5 territories. They're on the coast of Israel. And all of these 5 kings of those 5 territories, and, assumably the most prominent people, their military people, all of these people are there in this one place, and Samson has killed them all. And it says that this one day he killed more people in his death than he ever killed in his lifetime, than all those accumulated over his life. And then after he dies, it just says that his brothers came and got his body and took him back to their hometown and buried him in his father's tomb. Okay. And so this is the end of Samson's story. It says that he judged the Philistines for 20 years and then he died. And so what I want us to talk about today is how, yes, God had given Samson strength well before this time, right? But there's never any proof that Samson asked for this strength. There's never any indication that he thanked God for this strength. There's never any indication that he has prayed. We don't even know if he followed any of God's other laws. All we know is that he did the 3 things that made him a Nazirite, which is a person set aside to God. We don't know if he's done anything else. And it doesn't seem like he has a real personal relationship with God. It looks as though his relationship with God is superficial. It's like, I do these 3 outward things and then you give me strength. And so, here's the thing. His parents started this whole thing. It's not as if he willingly dedicated himself to God like other Nazirites did. God came to his parents and said, from the very second that he is born, he needs to be dedicated to me and be a Nazirite, which would mean he would do these 3 things. And obviously, yes, Samson has to continue to do these 3 things as he gets older and takes responsibility. But by that point, it's normal life, right? This is the way he's always lived, and his parents have told him this is how he's supposed to live. And then the first bout of superhuman strength that he gets, the first thing we hear about is how he tears a lion apart with his bare hands. And so the first time that he sees, okay, because I'm set aside to God, I get this superhuman strength. It's like, what's the big deal about staying away from dead bodies and not drinking or cutting my hair? I can do that. And so it doesn't really seem as though he is fully dedicated to God. Maybe he is. I'm just speculating here. But looking at his life, it looks like a very superficial dedication.